Remember when I did that video about 3 apps that I use to edit my iPhone photos? Well, this time I have something a little bit better for you. Real quick before we begin, my friends at Dehancer did set me up with this app so that I could review it. They're not paying me to do this review. All thoughts and opinions are my own, and this is just an honest review of an app that I think is really cool. This is the Dehancer mobile phone app. Now, Dehancer is this really cool plugin that allows you to turn your digital photos and video into something that looks like film. Now, this is an incredibly hard effect to achieve just with your standard editing apps. Now, sure, you can do things like pull down the saturation, add in some grain, stuff like that, but it never really ends up looking completely like film. It just looks like you faked it. With Dehancer, you can literally turn your digital photos into something that looks straight out of a film camera in a matter of minutes. And with their mobile phone app, it's never been easier. You can literally just take photos on your phone and turn them into something that looks straight off of a film camera. And the best part about this app is it's incredibly easy to use. So today we're gonna edit some photos and I'm gonna show you how this works. All right, so when you open the app, it just gives you a simple button, open photo or video, and I'm gonna go ahead and load in this photo that I took recently. So straight away you can see that we have a bunch of presets, and you can either just use some of the presets that they've already created, or you can go ahead and hit edit and do it all manually yourself. And just a quick tip, if you pull down on these little dots on the side here, it makes your image bigger, much easier to edit. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is go to films. There's 2 main things behind how your photo looks when you're using Dehancer. The first thing is the film that you're choosing, and the second is the print or the paper that you're putting it on. Now with real film, what they do is they capture that image or video on a certain kind of film stock, and then they print it onto either paper or another roll of film after. So those are gonna be kind of the 2 main variables in kind of how your image ends up looking. All right, so real quick before we get into this, you're gonna see right here, it says push and pull under films. And this is not the strength of the filter. This is actually the exposure. A lot of times in real film photography, photographers will either underexpose or overexpose their film in order to bring out certain kind of colors or characteristics. Because in digital photography, if you overexpose or underexpose, it just means brighter or darker. In film, it's different. Depending on if you over or underexpose your image, the colors are gonna look different, the saturation is gonna look different. So a lot of times film photographers will purposely over or underexpose their film to get, certain kind of color or mood out of the image. So that's what this is. This is the ability to kind of under or overexpose your image. You can see if I drag that back and forth, it changes the colors and the exposure of the image. And just like every slider in this app, if you double tap it, it just goes straight back to 0. All right, so here we have a bunch of different films, and it gives you a preview of kind of what that film is gonna look like. All right, so we have multiple different film brands in here to choose from. We have Agfa, Kodak, Fuji. There's so many different options, and these are all real life films that film photographers actually shoot on. So for this photo of these sunglasses, it's honestly actually looking pretty close to how I like it, but I mean, let's just go ahead and experiment with some of these different films. So kind of how I edit my photos when I'm working off my phone is I'll find a film that I like this one. I'm really happy with this one. And then I'll go ahead and see what it looks like either over or underexposed. And I honestly like this right there in the middle. And then I'm gonna go just straight over here to print, and we're gonna choose a profile. So this is, like I said earlier, either the paper or the film that it's being reprinted onto. So this is really just trying to mimic the actual film process. All right, so the first option we have is linear. We have Kodak Endura glossy paper, and then we have Fujifilm 3513, and we have another Kodak option. To be honest with you, I really like this Kodak 2383 print film. That's honestly what I use for most of my photos. And you can see this is already really starting to look like film. A lot of times what I'll do is go ahead and just bring down the tonal contrast. A lot of times if you're editing images from your phone, they're not raw, and so they already have a lot of contrast in them, and that is not really how film looks. All right, and then you also have options. You can go ahead and crop. You know, you can do freeform crop. They also have, you know, 4x5 for Instagram. And then over here under source, you have exposure compensation, temperature compensation, tint, all this kind of stuff. This is kind of just like a global edit. So this is going to raise the exposure over the entire image. Whereas if you were to go to film, like I was saying earlier, and use that push pull, that is going to react more how real film would work, as opposed to just raising or lowering the exposure of the image. Under developer, that's where you can add contrast, gamma correction, color separation, color boost. Under compression, this is actually where you can bring up or down the white point, black point, and the tonal range of your image. So film has a very wide dynamic range, and so you can bring that up and down, do whatever you want to do with that. The white point, again, you can edit this. You can make those whites look really bright, or, you know, staying more true to the film kind of look, you can bring those down, make it look more of like a creamy vintage white. All right, and expand is very, very similar. This is where the black point, so you can bring up and down that black point, similar to how we just did with the white. I think that looks good right around there. Color head, now this one is actually interesting. So for those who don't know about film, a color head is actually part of the film process. And so basically films are negative. So under the color head, what they do is they introduce a certain color, for example, yellow, magenta, cyan, things like that. And whatever color they introduce is actually going to give more of the opposite color in the final product. So you can see if I drag it back and forth, it's actually doing the opposite under yellow and blue, which is really interesting. They just really tried to stay true to the true film process, which is really, really cool. All right, and under film grain. Now you can add grain in pretty much any editing app. You can add grain right in Apple's editing app, but the cool thing about Dehancer's grain is that you can completely customize it. You can actually choose if there's more grain in the background, the foreground, the subject. They already have grain profiles from actual film cameras, or you can do it completely custom. I really like a lot of the 35s and the 65s, and depending on the photo, I'll usually drag it down to, you know, anywhere between 10 to 15. And the cool thing is you can also do color grain. So the thing about film is, unless it's a black and white photo, the grain is actually not going to be black and white. It's going to be colorful grain. Now, it's funny because in digital photography, colorful grain is actually just noise. But in film photography, you would never get monochromatic grain in a colored photo. So it's really cool that they added this feature to be able to add colored grain, because that's a lot more true to actual film photos. You know, most apps just give you the option to add monochromatic grain to your colored photos. All right, under halation and bloom, these do very similar things. Essentially what they're doing is amplifying a light source and kind of making it have that hazy, glowing kind of effects. Over here under vignette, pretty standard, pretty similar to other editing apps. Film damage, now this is really cool. I often add just a little bit of film damage to my photos, because I really think Dehancer does a great job at adding authentic, realistic looking film damage, as opposed to some of the other cheesy ones that you get with other apps. And then last but not least, we have overscan, and you can actually add like film scans to your photos, which is really cool. I mean, this, you can see this adds a really cool effect. I hardly ever do overscan, because if you use it too much, it can look kind of cheesy, but there's definitely times when it is pretty cool. All right, and now that that is exported, let's go ahead and check out the before and after. All right, so this is the before image, before Dehancer, and this is the after. That's pretty cool. You can see that this photo has a lot more character. It really has that vintage kind of film feeling to it, and it's just a really, really neat photo. Honestly, Dehancer is like the most fun app to use. It's almost completely replaced the other three apps that I went over in that other video, Mobile Lightroom, Snapseed, and Lens Distortions. Those apps are really cool, but honestly, the edits that you can do with just Dehancer are really cool. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Definitely check out the Dehancer mobile app for yourself. I think you're gonna love it if you're into editing photos and photography. It's just gonna take your game to like the next level. Once you have the ability to turn your iPhone photos into film photos, it's just like there's no going back. It's so much fun, and it just really unlocks so much creativity. So if you're interested in photography and editing and that kind of stuff, definitely check it out. I think you'll just find it all kinds of fun. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you got something out of it. Thanks so much for hanging out, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.